I never expected a cup of coffee would change my life forever. That Monday morning started like any other at Jacksonville Flight Academy, where I'd been teaching simulation for 7 years. Running late after a scheduling mix-up, I rushed into Starbucks wearing my crisp Navy instructor's uniform. "The usual, Claire?" Jake behind the counter called out. The morning crowd pressed around me, all of us caffeine-deprived professionals eager to start our days. "Make it quick, Jake. Got a new student at 8. I drummed my fingers on the counter, checking my watch. The gleaming ID badge with Claire Taylor, senior flight instructor, caught the morning light. That's when I saw her through the crowd, tall, graceful, with flowing dark hair and eyes that sparkled like summer leaves. She stood by the window, absorbed in a book about aviation history. Something about her presence made my heart skip. I grabbed my drink without looking, too distracted by the mysterious woman. Big mistake. The lid wasn't secure, and as I turned, hot coffee splashed across her pristine white blouse. "Oh, damn!" she gasped, jumping back. The book clattered to the floor. "I'm so sorry." I grabbed napkins, mortified. "Your blouse, it's ruined." Up close, her green eyes were even more striking. "Holly Ramirez," she said with a slight smile, dabbing at the stain. And honestly, I needed an excuse to go shopping anyway. "Claire Taylor, please let me pay for the dry cleaning." I fished out my business card. "I feel terrible about this." "A flight instructor?" Her eyes lit up. "Actually, I'm starting simulator training today at Jacksonville Flight Academy." My stomach did a little flip. "What time?" 8 o'clock. "With instructor Taylor?" She checked her phone. "Yes, actually." We stared at each other for a moment, then burst out laughing. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow around us. Other customers shuffled past, but in that moment, it felt like we were in our own little world. "Well," I said, trying to sound professional despite my racing heart, "looks like we'll be seeing a lot of each other." "Looks like it." Holly's smile held something more than just amusement. "Though maybe next time with less coffee involved?" I watched her walk away, her confident stride making my pulse quicken. 7 years of teaching hundreds of students, and suddenly I felt like a rookie again. Something told me these upcoming training sessions would be different from any others I'd done before. Back in my office, I tried to focus on reviewing Holly's application. Commercial pilot aspirations, excellent academic records, glowing recommendations. But all I could think about was the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how the morning light played in her dark hair. "Get it together, Taylor," I muttered to myself, straightening my nameplate. "She's just another student." But as I prepared the simulator for our first session, I knew I was lying to myself. The coffee stains on her blouse might fade, but something told me the impression she'd left on my life was permanent. Looking at the clock, I took a deep breath. 10 minutes until our first lesson, and I had a feeling this was going to be the beginning of something extraordinary. 8 o'clock came faster than I expected. I stood in the simulation room, running through pre-flight checks when Holly walked in. She'd changed into a navy blue blazer that made her look even more stunning than before. "Good morning, Miss Ramirez." I kept my voice steady, professional. "I see you managed to find a change of clothes. Please, call me Holly." She smiled, touching the blazer. "Fortunately, I keep spare clothes in my car, force of habit from my college days." The simulator hummed to life as I began the orientation. Holly settled into the pilot's seat, her fingers trailing over the controls with surprising familiarity. The morning sunlight streaming through the high windows caught her profile, and I forced myself to look away. "Previous flight experience?" I asked, noticing how naturally she gripped the yoke. "My father was a private pilot," she said. "I grew up around small aircraft, but commercial aviation is different. Bigger dreams, bigger challenges." I leaned over to adjust her seat position, catching a hint of her perfume. My heart raced as our hands briefly touched on the throttle control. The small space of the cockpit suddenly felt electric with tension. "Let's start with basic procedures," I said, stepping back to safer distance. "Show me your pre-flight checklist routine." Holly's competence was impressive. She moved through the sequence with precision that spoke of countless hours of study. But something about her presence was deeply distracting. The way she bit her lower lip in concentration, how her eyes sparkled when she mastered a new procedure. "You're a natural," I admitted after an hour. "But remember, confidence is good, overconfidence is dangerous." Speaking from experience? She turned those green eyes on me, and for a moment, I forgot I was supposed to be the instructor. We all make mistakes. I busied myself with the computer settings. That's why we train in simulators first. The lesson continued, but every moment felt charged with unspoken tension. When Holly successfully handled her first simulated emergency, her triumphant smile made my stomach flutter. "Excellent recovery," I said, checking her performance data. "Though your altitude dropped more than recommended during the maneuver. Then I'll need extra practice." She looked at me through her lashes. "Maybe some private lessons?" The suggestion hung in the air between us. I cleared my throat, maintaining professional distance. The Academy offers additional simulator hours to all students. Later, in my office, I reviewed Holly's first-day evaluation. Her technical skills were solid, but I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at me. 7 years of teaching, and I'd never felt so unsettled by a student. My phone buzzed, a message from the dry cleaner about Holly's stained blouse. I'd insisted on handling it, maintaining at least that small connection outside our instructor-student relationship. "Everything okay, Claire?" My colleague Sarah poked her head in. "You seem distracted today." "Just a challenging new student," I said, closing Holly's file. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Challenging in what way?" I couldn't answer that question honestly, even to myself. Instead, I gathered my things, ready to head home. But as I passed the simulator room, I saw Holly still there, practicing alone in the dim evening light. Our eyes met through the glass. She waved, and I waved back, feeling that same electric tension from this morning. Walking to my car, I realized I was in dangerous territory. Holly wasn't just another student, and these weren't just professional boundaries I was struggling with. The Jacksonville night was warm and heavy with possibility as I drove home, trying not to think about tomorrow's lesson. But who was I kidding? Tomorrow's lesson was all I could think about. The evening simulator sessions became our unspoken ritual. Long after other instructors had gone home, Holly and I would meet in the dimly lit training room. The night brought a different energy, more intimate, less formal. "Your crosswind landing technique is improving," I said one evening, watching her graceful movements at the controls. The simulator's soft glow illuminated her face in the darkness. "I have an excellent teacher." Holly's voice was soft, almost a whisper. She'd started wearing her hair down during our evening sessions, and it fell in waves past her shoulders. The air conditioning hummed quietly as we worked through advanced scenarios. Sometimes our hands would brush as I demonstrated a technique, sending electricity through my entire body. These moments felt stolen, precious. "Tell me about your dreams," I asked during a break, both of us leaning against the simulator's frame. The Jacksonville skyline twinkled through the windows. "I want to fly international routes," Holly said, her eyes bright with passion. "See the world from above, chase sunrises across continents." She turned to me. "What about your dreams, Claire?" The question caught me off guard. I'd spent so long teaching others to fly, I'd almost forgotten my own aspirations. I used to dream about flying cargo planes in Alaska, real frontier stuff. "What stopped you?" "Life, I guess, responsibilities." I shrugged, trying to ignore how close we were standing. Sometimes dreams change. Holly's hand found mine in the darkness. Or maybe they're just waiting for the right moment. I should have pulled away, maintained that professional distance. Instead, I let our fingers intertwine for just a moment before reality crashed back in. The security guard's footsteps echoing down the hall broke the spell. These late sessions became more frequent. Holly would bring coffee, no spilling this time, she'd joke, and I'd share stories from my early flying days. The simulator became our sanctuary, where roles of student and teacher blurred into something else. I caught her watching me sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her eyes followed my movements, lingered on my hands as I demonstrated procedures. It made my heart race every time. One night, she mastered a particularly challenging emergency scenario. Her joy was contagious, and without thinking, I hugged her in celebration. We held on a moment too long, both realizing too late how close we'd become. "I should go," Holly whispered, but didn't move away. The simulator's instruments cast a soft blue glow across her features. "You should," I agreed, equally motionless. The air between us felt charged, dangerous. Sarah, another instructor, started noticing our late sessions. Dedicated student you've got there, she commented one morning, her tone carefully neutral. She's talented, I replied, keeping my voice professional. Could be one of our best graduates. But talent wasn't why I looked forward to each evening, why my pulse quickened every time Holly walked into the room. It wasn't why I spent hours planning specialized scenarios just to see her eyes light up with excitement. The lines were blurring, and I knew it. Every professional boundary I'd built over 7 years of teaching was being tested. Yet, each night, I found myself back in that simulator room, watching Holly chase her dreams across virtual skies. You've changed, my sister remarked during our weekly call. You sound happier. I stared out my apartment window at the night sky, thinking of green eyes and gentle hands on flight controls. Just enjoying teaching, I said, the lie tasting bitter. The truth was, I was falling. Not the controlled descent I taught in the simulator, but a free fall into something both thrilling and terrifying. And deep down, I knew Holly was falling too. The question was whether we'd crash or somehow find a safe landing together. The autumn air grew cooler, but the tension between Holly and me only heated up. After another successful simulation, we found ourselves alone in the darkened cockpit, celebrating her mastery of emergency protocols. You're ready for the next level, I said, trying to maintain professional distance. But the small space felt electric with unspoken words. I couldn't have done it without you. Holly turned in the pilot's seat, her face inches from mine as I leaned over the control panel. Our eyes met, and time seemed to stop. For a heartbeat, we both leaned in slightly. The scent of her perfume filled my senses, her lips so close I could feel her breath. Then a door slammed somewhere in the building, shattering the moment. I should check those readings, I stammered, retreating to safer ground. Holly's disappointed expression haunted me all evening. That night, alone in my apartment, I did something I hadn't done in years. Downloaded a dating app. Maybe meeting someone else would help clear my head, stop these inappropriate feelings for my student. Creating my profile felt strange. Flight instructor 35 seeking meaningful connection, I wrote, carefully avoiding adding a photo that showed my uniform. The academy had strict policies about professional image. Days passed, and I noticed Holly seemed distracted during lessons. She'd check her phone more often, smile at messages from someone unknown. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. Hot date? I asked one evening, immediately regretting the unprofessional question. Just talking to someone interesting online, she replied, studying my reaction. She seems promising. The word she echoed in my head all night. Back home, I opened the dating app, mindlessly swiping through profiles until one stopped me cold. Dark hair, green eyes, aviation enthusiast. No photo showed her face clearly, but something felt familiar. We matched, started chatting. She was witty, intelligent, passionate about flying. We talked about everything except our real names or faces, agreeing to maintain mystery until meeting. During lessons, Holly and I maintained professional distance, but something had shifted. She'd smile at her phone, and I'd wonder if she was reading my messages. I'd send a late-night comment about cloud formations, and the next day she'd reference it in class. Your mystery woman sounds perfect, Sarah commented during lunch, reading my latest chat exchange. When are you meeting her? We're taking it slow, I said, not mentioning how my heart raced every time a new message appeared. The online conversations grew deeper, more personal. We shared dreams, fears, childhood memories, all while carefully dancing around details that might reveal our identities. I feel like I've known you forever, Holly's online persona wrote one night. The irony wasn't lost on me. Finally, after weeks of digital dancing, we agreed to meet. A cozy restaurant downtown, next Friday evening. The forecast predicted storms, but nothing could dampen my excitement. That week's lessons were torture. Holly seemed equally distracted, checking the time frequently, smiling at her phone. Each time she did, I wondered if she was confirming details with her online date, never suspecting it was me. Big plans this weekend? I asked during our final lesson of the week, trying to sound casual. Actually, yes. Holly's eyes sparkled with anticipation. I'm finally meeting someone special. I nodded, my own excitement mixing with a complicated guilt. Hope it goes well. As she left, I watched her walk away, wondering how tomorrow night would change everything. Neither of us had any idea we were both counting down the hours to the same moment, to a revelation that would either destroy our careful boundaries or create something entirely new. Friday evening arrived with ominous clouds gathering over Jacksonville. I spent an hour choosing my outfit, a blue silk blouse that matched my eyes and black slacks. The restaurant we'd chosen was intimate, tucked away downtown. The first drops of rain fell as I pulled into the parking lot. Weather alerts flashed across my phone: severe thunderstorm warning, possible tropical storm conditions. I hesitated but couldn't bring myself to cancel. This mysterious woman had become too important. Inside, the hostess led me to a corner table. "Your other party hasn't arrived yet," she said, just as thunder cracked overhead. The lights flickered ominously. My phone buzzed. A message from my date. "Running a few minutes late. This weather is crazy." The storm intensified. Rain lashed against the windows as the manager approached tables, speaking in hushed tones. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're under a severe weather warning. Roads are flooding. We recommend." That's when she walked in. Holly, wearing a green dress that made her eyes shine, her hair damp from the rain. Our eyes met across the room. Recognition, shock, understanding. "Claire?" Her voice was barely audible over the storm. "You're..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Everything clicked into place. All our conversations, shared dreams, careful omissions. The lights went out. Emergency generators hummed to life as the manager announced they were closing immediately. Outside, the streets had become rivers. "My apartment's 2 blocks away," I heard myself say. "We can wait out the storm there." We ran through the deluge, holding our jackets over our heads, laughing despite the absurdity of the situation. By the time we reached my building, we were soaked through. Inside my apartment, standing in the dim emergency lighting, we faced each other. Water dripped from our clothes onto the hardwood floors. "So," Holly said, wringing out her hair, "all those messages were real." I handed her a towel. Every word. Thunder rattled the windows. The storm had trapped us together, forced us to confront what we'd been dancing around for months. "I should have known it was you," Holly said softly. "The way you wrote about flying, about watching the sunrise from above the clouds. I should have recognized your passion for aviation, your dreams of international flights." I moved closer, drawn by an invisible force. The emergency lights cast soft shadows across her face. A drop of water traced down her neck. Without thinking, I reached out to brush it away. Our eyes met in the darkness. All the barriers, student and teacher, professional boundaries, online anonymity, crumbled in that moment. "What happens now?" Holly whispered, her hand finding mine. Outside, the storm raged, but in my apartment, time stood still. We were no longer instructor and student, no longer online mysteries to each other. We were just 2 people, standing on the edge of something profound. "Now," I said, my heart racing, "we stop pretending." The power flickered, plunging us into complete darkness for a moment. When the emergency lights sputtered back on, we were inches apart. Holly's hand cupped my cheek, and all the reasons why we shouldn't dissolved like rain. Our first kiss was soft, tentative, like the first rays of dawn after a storm. Then deeper, months of suppressed feelings pouring out. Her lips tasted of rain and possibility. We broke apart as another thundercrack shook the building. The storm had brought us here, forced us to face what we'd both been avoiding. There would be complications, consequences, but in that moment, none of it mattered. "The weather report says the storm might last all night," Holly said, her fingers still intertwined with mine. "Good," I replied, pulling her closer. Outside, the wind howled and rain battered the windows, but we had found our shelter in each other's arms. Lightning illuminated my apartment as the storm continued its assault on Jacksonville. Holly and I sat on my couch, wrapped in soft blankets, our damp clothes hanging in the bathroom. "Remember that first coffee spill?" Holly laughed, running her fingers through her still damp hair. "Was that really an accident?" "Completely unplanned," I smiled, handing her a mug of hot tea. "Though I can't say I regret it now." The power had been out for hours, but neither of us minded. Battery-powered lanterns cast a warm glow around us, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt separate from the rest of the world. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Holly said, curling closer. Her warmth against my side felt natural, right? I almost quit teaching last year, I admitted. Felt like I was just going through the motions. Then you walked in and suddenly everything felt new again. Thunder rolled outside as Holly told me about her own past. Growing up in a conservative Florida family, hiding her true self, finding freedom in the sky. Each revelation brought us closer, filling in the gaps our online conversations had left. My parents think I'm just focused on my career, she said softly. They keep trying to set me up with nice young men from their church. I pulled her closer, understanding the weight of secrets. And what do you want? This, she whispered, turning to face me. Just this. Our second kiss was different from our first, slower, deeper, filled with understanding rather than surprise. The storm seemed to fade away, leaving only us, wrapped in darkness and discovery. That night, we made love for the first time. It was tender and passionate, a culmination of months of tension and desire. The rain provided a rhythm to our exploration, the occasional flash of lightning illuminating bare skin and tender touches. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets, Holly traced patterns on my shoulder. What happens Monday? She asked. At the academy? Reality started seeping back in. We'll need to be careful, I said. Professional boundaries during training hours. And after hours? I kissed her softly. After hours, we can be us. We spent the night sharing stories, dreams, and gentle touches. Holly told me about her first solo flight in her father's Cessna, how the freedom of being alone in the sky had brought her to tears. I shared my own stories of learning to fly, the mistakes and triumphs that had led me to teaching. Morning came with clearing skies and new challenges. Holly borrowed one of my shirts, the sight of her in my clothes making my heart skip. We made breakfast together, moving around my kitchen like we'd done it 100 times before. I should head home, Holly said eventually, though she made no move to leave. Need to change before meeting Sarah for simulator practice. I pulled her into one last embrace, breathing in the scent of her hair. This changes everything, doesn't it? Everything worth having does. She kissed me goodbye, soft and promising. After she left, I stood in my apartment, still feeling the echo of her presence. Photos on my walls showed various aircraft I'd flown, places I'd been. Now they seemed like chapters in a story that had been leading to this moment. My phone buzzed, a message from Holly. Miss you already, worth the wait. I smiled, touching my lips where hers had been. The storm had cleared, but something more powerful had taken root. We'd have to be careful, professional, discreet. But we both knew there was no going back. Like a plane past the point of no return, we were committed to this flight path, wherever it might lead. The morning sun streamed through my windows, catching the lingering raindrops and turning them to diamonds. A new day, a new chapter, a new beginning. The storm had changed everything, and I couldn't wait to see where this journey would take us. The call came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Holly and I were reviewing her progress charts in my office when her phone lit up with Mom calling. I should take this, she said, stepping into the hallway. I watched through the glass as her expression shifted from relaxed to tense. They're coming to visit, she announced when she returned, her face pale. Mom and Dad, they'll be here tomorrow. We'd been careful at the academy, professional, distant. But her parents' sudden visit threatened our delicate balance. They thought their daughter was fully focused on her pilot training, nothing else. I can't tell them, Holly said that night in my apartment. Not yet. They're helping with tuition and Dad's aviation connections. I held her close, understanding the weight of her fears. We'll handle it, professional distance while they're here. The next morning, I met Richard and Margaret Ramirez in my official capacity as flight instructor. Holly's father, a retired private pilot, scrutinized every detail of our training program. Your daughter has exceptional aptitude, I said, maintaining eye contact despite my racing heart. One of our most promising students. She gets that from me, Richard smiled proudly. Though I always imagined her flying private charters, not commercial. Margaret touched Holly's arm. Speaking of private matters, dear, David Matthews asked about you again. His son's law practice is doing so well. I busied myself with the simulator controls, trying to ignore the way Holly's shoulders tensed. Mom, please. I'm focused on my career right now. Darling, you're not getting any younger. 28 is. Would you like to see a training session? I interrupted, earning a grateful glance from Holly. The simulator demonstration went perfectly. Holly's skills impressive even under her father's critical eye. But dinner that evening proved more challenging. "We've found a lovely church here in Jacksonville," Margaret announced. "The young professionals group meets on Thursdays." Holly pushed her food around her plate. "I have simulator practice Thursday evenings." "Every Thursday?" Her mother's voice carried a hint of suspicion. "Surely your instructor doesn't expect." "Miss Taylor is very thorough," Holly said, our eyes meeting briefly across the table. "These extra sessions are crucial." Later that night, Holly slipped into my apartment, tears in her eyes. "I hate lying to them, but they'd never understand." "They might surprise you," I said, though we both knew better. The week of their visit stretched endlessly. We maintained our professional facade, but every stolen glance, every accidental touch, felt magnified under their watchful eyes. Friday morning, Holly finally broke. Her mother had left another wedding magazine in her apartment, filled with post-it notes marking eligible bachelors. "I'm not living their dream anymore," she declared during our morning briefing. "I'm living mine." "Are you sure?" I asked, knowing what she risked. "I've never been more sure of anything." Her voice was steady, her green eyes clear. "I'm tired of hiding who I am, what I want." The conversation with her parents that evening was painful. Words like phase and confusion echoed through Holly's apartment. Margaret cried. Richard stood silent, his aviation magazines forgotten on the coffee table. "I'm still the same person," Holly said firmly. "Still your daughter, still a pilot. I'm just finally being honest about who I love." They left early the next morning, without goodbyes. Holly showed up at my door, exhausted but somehow lighter. "They'll need time," she said, curling into my arms. "But I couldn't keep pretending." "You're the bravest person I know," I whispered, holding her close. We spent that weekend together. No more hiding. Holly's phone remained silent, no calls from her parents, but she stood taller, as if releasing the truth had freed something inside her. "Remember what you taught me about turbulence?" she said Sunday evening. "Sometimes you have to fly through it to reach clear skies." I kissed her forehead, marveling at her strength. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we'd navigate it together, just like we did in the simulator. Sometimes the scariest flights lead to the most beautiful destinations. 2 weeks after her parents' departure, Holly threw herself into her final certification preparations. The simulator room became our sanctuary again, but now filled with a different kind of tension, the pressure of upcoming tests. "You're overcorrecting on the descent," I said one evening, watching her hands grip the controls. "Trust your instincts more." "Easy for you to say." Holly's voice was tight with stress. "You're not the one with everything riding on this." I understood her pressure. After standing up to her family, failure wasn't an option. She needed to prove her choices hadn't affected her dreams. Late one night, after a particularly grueling practice session, Holly slumped in the pilot's seat. "What if I'm not ready?" "Look at me," I said, turning her chair to face me. "You were born for this. I've never seen anyone with more natural talent." Her eyes met mine, vulnerable yet determined. "Promise?" Instead of answering, I kissed her softly, right there in the simulator, a small act of rebellion that felt like freedom. The next morning, an email arrived from her father. Holly read it during our break, tears forming in her eyes. "Dad's still processing everything," she said, showing me the message. "But he's arranged for me to meet some senior pilots at major airlines. Says talent shouldn't be wasted, regardless of personal matters." It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a start. The weekend before her final tests, we escaped to a small coastal resort. 2 days of no simulators, no family drama, just us. The ocean breeze carried away our worries as we walked along empty beaches. That night, we made love with the sound of waves crashing outside our window. Every touch felt like celebration, like promise, like future. Holly's skin glowed in the moonlight as we explored each other with unhurried passion. "I never thought I could have both," Holly whispered afterward, tracing patterns on my chest. "My dreams of flying and this, you." Monday brought reality back into focus. Holly's final tests loomed, each simulation more challenging than the last. I stayed professional during evaluations, but my heart soared with every obstacle she conquered. The final test day arrived crisp and clear. Holly wore her lucky blue shirt, the one she'd been wearing when we first met. Other instructors filled the observation room, watching as she faced the most challenging scenarios. Engine failure over water, zero visibility landing, multiple system malfunctions. Holly handled each with growing confidence, her movements smooth and assured. When the final scenario ended, the room erupted in applause. Holly's scores were exceptional, setting a new academy record. "Congratulations, Miss Ramirez," I said formally, extending my hand. But my eyes said everything we couldn't express in front of others. That evening, we celebrated privately at my apartment. Holly wore her new pilot's wings proudly as she opened a bottle of champagne. "To new horizons," she toasted, her eyes sparkling. "To us," I added softly. Later, wrapped in sheets and afterglow, Holly showed me the airline interview requests already filling her inbox. Major carriers, international routes, everything she'd dreamed of. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, kissing me deeply. "Yes, you could have," I replied. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." The morning light found us planning future adventures, mapping out possibilities. Holly's career was taking off, and somehow, against all odds, we'd found a way to make everything work. "Think you can handle dating a commercial pilot?" she teased. "All those long-distance flights?" I pulled her closer, breathing in her scent. "As long as you always come home to me." "Always," she promised, sealing it with a kiss. Outside, the sun rose over Jacksonville, painting the sky in shades of possibility. We'd weathered the storms, faced the turbulence, and emerged stronger. Now, finally, we were ready to soar together. I didn't expect Sarah to show up at my door on a rainy Sunday morning. Her presence, along with the familiar flash of red hair I glimpsed behind her, made my stomach drop. "Claire," Sarah said carefully. "Look who I ran into at the airport. Remember Kate?" Kate stepped forward, her smile exactly as I remembered it from 3 years ago. "Hey stranger, heard you're still teaching people to fly." Holly was due at my apartment any minute for brunch. I glanced at my phone, trying to figure out how to handle this collision of past and present. "It's been a while," I managed, inviting them in despite my better judgment. "What brings you back to Jacksonville?" "Airline restructuring," Kate said, settling onto my couch like she'd never left. "They're expanding the Southeast Division. Thought of you immediately." Sarah excused herself, leaving me alone with my ex. Kate and I had flown together for years before she chose an international route over our relationship. "You look good," Kate said, moving closer. "Teaching suits you." "Kate," I started, but she cut me off. "I made a mistake, Claire, leaving like that. I've thought about you every time I've flown over Jacksonville." A knock at the door saved me from responding. Holly stood there, beautiful in casual weekend clothes, her smile fading as she took in the scene. "Oh," she said quietly. "I didn't realize you had company." The tension in the room shifted as introductions were made. Kate's eyes narrowed with recognition. She'd seen the news about Holly's record-breaking certification scores. "Your star student," Kate said, her tone carrying an edge. "Sarah mentioned you two had gotten close." Holly's hand found mine, a quiet claim. "Very close," she confirmed. Kate's laugh held no humor. "Always the instructor-student dynamic with you, isn't it, Claire?" "That's not fair," I snapped, feeling Holly tense beside me. "Isn't it? We met when you were teaching advanced certification courses. Now here you are again, with another student." "Former student," Holly corrected firmly. "And you don't know anything about us." "I know Claire," Kate said, standing. "Know how she loses herself in teaching, in molding new pilots, makes them feel special, needed. Then moves on to the next one. That's enough." My voice was sharp. "You left, Kate, for your career. Don't rewrite history now." Holly squeezed my hand, her presence grounding me. Kate noticed the gesture, her expression hardening. "Just be careful, Holly," she said, gathering her things. "Ask her about Amanda, or Jessica, or—" "Get out," I interrupted. "Now." After Kate left, silence filled the apartment. Holly stood by the window, her back to me. "Holly, please, let me explain. Were there others?" she asked quietly. "Like she said?" "No, not like she implied." I moved closer, relieved when she didn't pull away. Kate and I had a real relationship that ended badly. The others were brief connections, nothing serious. And us? Holly turned, her eyes searching mine. Are we serious? You know we are. I reached for her hand. What Kate and I had doesn't compare to this. I saw how she looked at you, Holly admitted. Like she wanted you back. Well, she can't have me. I pulled Holly close. I'm exactly where I want to be. We ended up in the simulator that evening. Holly's way of processing. She ran through complex maneuvers while I watched, both of us finding comfort in familiar routine. I trust you, she said finally, powering down the system. But no more exes showing up unannounced, okay? I laughed, pulling her in for a kiss. Deal. Later, tangled together on my couch, Holly asked about Kate's career choice. She chose Singapore Airlines over us, I explained. Said long distance could work. Could it? Holly asked softly. Work for us, I mean? When I start flying international routes? I kissed her temple. We'll make it work, because we both choose us. The rain had stopped, leaving Jacksonville's sky clear and star-filled. Kate's visit had stirred up old wounds but somehow made our present stronger. I love you, Holly said suddenly, the first time either of us had said it. My heart soared higher than any aircraft could reach. I love you too. The job offer came on a bright December morning. Holly held the letter from United Airlines, her hands trembling slightly as she read. International routes, she said, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. Based out of Chicago. We sat in silence, letting the implications sink in. Chicago meant leaving Jacksonville, leaving our familiar routines, leaving my position at the academy. Claire, Holly started, but I cut her off with a kiss. Don't you dare turn this down, I whispered against her lips. This is everything you've worked for. But what about us, your career, the academy? I'd been wrestling with these questions since Holly first started applying for positions. Teaching had been my life for 7 years, but something had shifted. Maybe it was time for a change. Actually, I said, pulling out my laptop, I've been doing some research. Major airlines need simulator instructors too, and Chicago has several flight schools. Holly's eyes widened. You'd leave Jacksonville? For me? For us, I corrected. Besides, I think I'm ready for a new challenge. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of applications and interviews. I reached out to contacts in the industry, surprised by how many doors opened. My experience at the academy carried more weight than I'd realized. Sarah helped me pack up my office, years of memories going into boxes. The academy won't be the same without you, she said, handling my old flight manuals. Change is good, I replied, though my heart ached a little. This office had seen so much, including the beginning of my journey with Holly. The hardest part was telling my students. Many had grown attached, depending on our extra training sessions and mentorship. Who's going to push us like you did? One asked during my final class. Push yourselves, I answered, thinking of Holly's determination. The sky's the limit. Holly's parents surprised us both by offering to help with the move. Her father arrived one weekend to assess the situation. Chicago's a good market, he said gruffly. Lots of opportunities in aviation. It wasn't quite acceptance, but it was progress. Later, he pulled me aside. Take care of her, he said simply. She's still my little girl. Always, I promised, meaning it with every fiber of my being. The decision about whose furniture to keep and whose to sell led to another conversation, about finding a place together in Chicago. If you want to live separately at first, Holly offered, but I shook my head. We've wasted enough time pretending we're not meant to be together. I pulled up apartment listings near O'Hare. Let's do this right. United's offer included relocation assistance, making the logistics easier. Still, dismantling 2 lives to build one together proved challenging. What if we're making a mistake? Holly asked one night, surrounded by moving boxes. What if Chicago doesn't work out? I took her hand, led her to the window. See those stars? They're the same ones we'll see from Chicago. Same sky, same us, just a different runway. She laughed at my aviation metaphor, tension easing from her shoulders. When did you become so wise? Probably around the time you spilled coffee on yourself and changed my life. The academy threw us a farewell party. Sarah made a speech that had everyone laughing and crying. Even Kate sent a congratulatory message, proving time heals most wounds. Our last night in Jacksonville, we visited the simulator room one final time. Holly ran through her first lesson, both of us remembering the nervous student she'd been. "Ready for takeoff?" I asked, using our old training phrase. Holly pulled me close, kissing me under the simulator's gentle hum. "With you? Always." Tomorrow would bring moving trucks, goodbye hugs, and a long drive north. But tonight, in our special place, we held each other and dreamed of new horizons. The future stretched before us like an open runway, full of possibility and promise. Chicago wasn't just a new city, it was our chance to write the next chapter together. Spring arrived in Chicago with gentle winds and new beginnings. Our apartment near O'Hare gave us front row seats to the daily ballet of takeoffs and landings. Holly's career at United was soaring, while I'd found my place teaching at the Greater Chicago Flight Academy. "Remember our first simulator session?" Holly asked one morning, watching planes climb into the dawn sky. I was so nervous. "And now look at you," I smiled, handing her coffee. "International routes, perfect safety record. Students asking for your autograph." We'd settled into a rhythm, our lives intertwining like perfectly choreographed flight paths. Holly's parents had even visited last month, her father proudly watching her command the simulator during a training demonstration. "Mom actually hugged you goodbye," Holly marveled afterward. "Never thought I'd see that day." The idea came to me during one of her long-haul flights to London. I spent 3 days planning, calling in favors from old aviation friends. When Holly returned, I suggested a sunset flight in a small private plane, just us, the sky, and a very special question. "For old time's sake," I said, helping her pre-flight check the Cessna. "Let's see if I taught you well." The evening air was smooth as silk as we climbed above Chicago's glittering skyline. Lake Michigan stretched before us like polished glass, reflecting the golden light. "Take us around the lake," I suggested, my heart racing faster than the engine. Holly handled the controls with natural grace, completely in her element. At our perfect cruising altitude, I pulled out a small box. "Holly Ramirez," I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. "You've been my best student, my greatest adventure, and my truest love. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the ring. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." We celebrated with a perfect landing, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The ceremony was held at a small private airfield outside Jacksonville, our worlds coming full circle. Sarah was my maid of honor, and to everyone's surprise, Holly's father walked her down the aisle. "The sky brought you together," the officiant said, as we exchanged vows under the open air. 2 pilots finding their perfect CO pilot. Friends from both flight academies attended, along with Holly's United colleagues and my Chicago students. Even Kate sent a congratulatory bouquet, proving time heals all wounds. The reception featured a cake topped with 2 tiny aircraft, their contrails forming a heart. Holly's mother dabbed her eyes during the speeches, finally seeing the beauty in our unconventional love story. "To the newlyweds," Sarah toasted, raising her glass. "May your love soar as high as your dreams." Later, during our first dance, Holly leaned close. "Think we'll ever stop using aviation metaphors?" "Not a chance," I laughed, spinning her under the fairy lights. "They're part of our story." We honeymooned in Alaska, where I finally lived my dream of flying cargo planes through the frontier. Holly navigated while I piloted, our teamwork as perfect in the cockpit as in life. Back in Chicago, we created a home filled with aviation memorabilia and love. Photos from Jacksonville hung beside maps of new destinations, each one marking another chapter in our journey. "You know what I love most?" Holly said one evening, as we watched the airport lights blink against the dark sky. "No matter where we fly, we always have each other to come home to." I pulled her close, thinking of that first coffee spill that started everything. Best navigation error I ever made. The night sky stretched endless above us, full of stars and possibilities. We'd found our cruising altitude, our perfect flight path, our forever home in each other's hearts. Some love stories are written in the stars. Ours was written in the sky, traced by contrails and starlight, guided by 2 hearts that dared to soar together.